Masechet Yevamot, Daf Kof Chaf Aleph. We are nearing the end, and this Mishnah is going to discuss cases we've already been seeing. When someone falls into water, at what point can we testify that for sure they have died so that the wife can remarry? Or when do we suspect that there's a possibility that they could have survived? So, various cases. We're going to have lots of different stories of things that happened in different scenarios. So nafal lamayim, a man falls into the water. Ben sheyesh lahen sof, ben she'en lahem sof, ishto asura. According to the first opinion in the Mishnah, it doesn't matter whether the water has an edge or does not have an edge. All waters have an edge, obviously, but the point is, can it be seen? It doesn't matter if the witness can see the edge of the water, or if from his perspective it's endless. Either way, his wife is prohibited from remarrying because he can't be sure. Rabbi Meir agrees with this and gives an actual case where someone fell into a cistern, a big cistern, that is water that has an edge. You can see the edge of the cistern. And so we would assume that since it does have an edge, it's more likely that the person has actually died, because we can look at the cistern and look around and see that he didn't come up within an hour or two. How long can a person live? So we might assume that the person has died. However, to be made, it says no, once happened and the person was able to emerge alive even after 3 days. As the Gemara is going to discuss, it could be there are cases when a person can find an air pocket or a cave or something under there and somehow be able to survive. Okay, so that is the first opinion. That's more stringent. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Maaseh besoma sheyarad litbo bim'ara v'yarad moshcho acharav v'sho kedei shetei nafsham v'yusiu et neshotehem. Rabbi Yosef said, no, I disagree. After all, there was a case of a blind person that went to dunk in a cave, water in a cave. That is enclosed space, so that would be yesh lahem sof. And he had a guide also with him. The guide went also in the cave, and they both did not come out. The people that were the bystanders waited there until they died. They whatever the reason, they couldn't save them, and so they were underwater, didn't know where they were. So they waited to see if they would come out. They waited enough time that a person could possibly hold his breath underwater, and after that, they said, oh, they must have died. And so their wives got married based on their words. What do you see from this story? That if the water has a definite edge and people are seeing and can see that they drowned and they never came out, then surely they are dead. So he disagrees and says that water that does have a visible edge, you can be sure that they did not make it. So this case yesterday, a case in Asia where they lowered a person on a rope into the sea, and when they brought it up, all they had left was his leg. What happened to the rest of him? So the sage says, if he was cut, his leg was cut off from his knee and higher, then surely that's a major wound. There was no way he would be able to live, and so his wife can remarry. But if his leg was cut on the lower leg from below the knee, then it's possible for a person to survive. Now, what happened to the guy? This was in the Yam. That's very big, so the person cannot see the edge. Therefore, it's possible that a current swept him and he was able to swim or grab onto something floating and somehow was able to go to a shore even though it was out of sight. So you see, the Bia says two stories here show the distinction. If it's an enclosed area and we see that they don't come out for a while, then you can presume they're dead. If it's a big open space, then we have to worry that the person has in fact survived. Okay, so now we're going to see a baraita that summarizes the machloket nicely. To Rabbanan, nafal hamayim ben sheyesh lahem sof, ben she'en lahem sof, ishto asura. Rabbi Meir is machmir and says any type of water, even in closed space, it's possible for a person somehow to survive even under the water. וחכמים אומרים מים שיש להם סוף אשתו מותרת ושאין להם סוף אשתו אסורה. Chachamim, however, say if it has an edge, then his wife is permitted, because we can stay there and see that he never came out. But if it has no edge, we can't see the edge of the water, then we suspect that maybe he was able to get out somewhere that we cannot tell. What is the definition of water that has an end? Any time that the bystander, the witness, can stand there and see in all four directions. He can see all the exits all around the body of water. And therefore, if he stands there for, a few minutes, an hour, surely the person, and that person didn't come up, surely the person can't hold his breath that long, and we can testify that he has died. Story. There was a certain person who drowned in the lake. This was a big lake that you couldn't see the edge, in a place called Samkeh. And Rav Shelah heard the case and said his wife can get remarried. Amar Rav Shmuel, Ta nishamte. So Rav heard what Rav Shelah did, and he told his colleague Shemuel, let's go excommunicate him, because this is water that has no edge. And the halacha is, if it has no edge, then we don't know for sure the person died. Maybe he got out on a place that we don't see. So Rav Shelah is, he's permitting women to marry without proper procedure. So let's excommunicate him. Shemuel says, let's check first. Let's send him a message and verify the details of the case. They only heard about it. Let's ask him. Maybe he has a good reason. So they ask him, they ask him roundabout, not directly about this case, but how about the halacha in general? So they send him a letter. If water has no edge, is his wife, and someone drowns in it, is his wife prohibited or permitted from marrying again? He said, no, not allowed. That's the right answer. Maybe he made a mistake regarding the definition. So this particular lake, is that considered endless water, or has an edge, or it's endless water? Who is in fact an endless body of water. So now they go right to the direct question, why did you permit the wife to get married? And his answer is, I made a mistake. Sorry. I thought that even though we can't see the edge, since the water is gathered and stagnant, it's there. It's not flowing like a river, so I figured, how far could he go? If I just look in the area for an hour and see that he didn't come up, then it's the same as if it has an edge. So that's what I thought. But in fact, when I looked at it further, I saw that in fact there are waves in the water, and it could be that the waves could have carried him out of sight, and then he could have gone out somewhere else. So it could be, could be waves on top. It could be an undercurrent that may have taken him away out of sight. And he lived, so I made a mistake. So you see, it was good that they did not excommunicate him. He didn't purposely go against the halacha. Mistakes happen. It's all right. Shemuel said about Rav the following pasuk, no accident shall befall the righteous person. Rav, at first, he wanted to excommunicate him, but that would have been wrong. And so but Rav realized, he doesn't deserve excommunication. So Shemuel said about him, see, you're a righteous person, and therefore you were saved from doing the wrong thing. And Rav said, actually, it's thanks to you. You told me that I should send him a letter first. So Kare Rav Ale de Shmuel. So Rav said about Shmuel, Utshu'a berobyo, salvation comes with much counsel, meaning it's always good to consult with colleagues, ask advice, and that will prevent someone from making a mistake. Tanya, next baraita, Amar Rabbi, that's a Yehuda Nasi. Maaseh b'shnei bnei adam shemechamerin michmorin bayarden. One time there was a case of two people that were fishing with fishing nets in the Jordan River. V'nichnas echad mehem limchayla shel dagim. One of them went into a cave with fish in it. Inside, within the river, there could be a side, a place on the side where there are fish that are inside this cave. So the fisherman went to set a trap inside there, but then while he was in there, the sun set and it got dark and he couldn't find the exit of the cave. However, within these caves, it's possible to have an air pocket, and one can breathe within that cave, even though it's actually inside the river. His friend who was outside didn't know where he went. He thought he went in the river, never came out, and assumed he must be dead. He waited there a few minutes until for sure a person can't hold his breath underwater that long. And then he came home and came to the person's family, and they told him, sorry, your family member, your husband, your father, went into the river to set a trap. He never came out, so therefore he must be dead. But turns out that fisherman was inside the cave the whole night. He was able to find an air pocket and breathe in there. And then in the morning, when the sun came out, there was light again, and he was able to find the exit of the cave. He came home, he saw everybody was in mourning in his house because they all thought he died. So this was a happy day when they saw him, that he in fact was alive. Rabbi says, see, what a great thing that the sages have taught us, that a body of water that has an edge, his wife is permitted, whereas if it does not have an edge, then his wife is prohibited. The Jordan River is, after all, very long, and you can't see the end of it, so that would be like En Himsof, and therefore his wife was prohibited from remarrying, because who knows, maybe he survived, and sure enough, in this very case, he did in fact survive. However, next question. Yeah, but here it happened to be that it's a river that has no edge. But why don't we suspect that even in a body of water where we can see the edge, maybe there is a cave of fish that the person can enter into and survive. And so therefore, even bounded water, we should not permit the wife to remarry. Maybe the person is able to survive. And the answer is b'mayim sheyesh lahem sof mechayla shel dagim lo shechicha. It's not often that you find a cave of fish in a body of water that is small, that you can see all the edges. That phenomenon is only found in these large bodies of water. This story reminds me of that case a few years ago of the hikers in Israel that were hiking around, and a flash flood came and came all the way up, and they were stuck inside a cave that they were able to walk into, but now the mouth of the cave was all full of water. However, a lot of people assumed that they would have perished, but scuba divers went in and they found that there was in fact an air pocket, that the cave went higher up, and they were in there able to breathe, and the scuba divers were able to save them. So that's an actual modern day case, just like this story. Amar Rav Ashe, had amru Rabbanan maim she'en lahem sof ishto asura, hanemili be'inishte alma vastu surba Rabbanan la is de salik kala it le. Rav Ashe said that when the rabbis taught that if the water has an edge, then that has no edge, endless water, the wife is prohibited because maybe they were swept down shore and they emerged elsewhere. That's true regarding a general population. But if the person is a sage, then we do not say that, because if they in fact emerge, then there would be publicity about it. They would have a voice. And people would say, did you hear Rabbi so-and-so? The rabbis were famous. They were like rock stars. And so if they were able to survive and come out in some other village, everyone would be talking about it, and then we would hear about it. So therefore, if a sage drowns, goes in the water, even in water that has no edge, we can assume, we wait a while and there's no news, then we can assume that they are dead and be lenient regarding that. That's Rav Asher's opinion. However, we answer, Velohi lo shena inishtama lo shena merabanan diabadin lechatechila lo. But we do not follow that, and in fact, it makes no difference whether the person's a regular person or a rabbi. If b'diavad the wife went and remarried, so we accept it, b'di'avad. But l'chetechila, we do not allow the woman to remarry not in either case. Good. Tanya, Amar Rabban Gamliel, Pama achat hayiti me'alech b'sfina v're'iti sfina achat shenishbera. One time Rabban Gamliel was on a boat. He was often on boats. He was the Nasi, so he was often traveling for political business. And he saw another boat that was broken and was sinking, and he was very sad because there was an important sage on that boat. Who was it? Umano Rabbi Akiva. He wouldn't have a possibility. He wasn't able to save him or the boat, so he was very sad that a great person drowned on the boat. Rabban Gamliel was older than Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva could have been his student. But then when Rabban Gamliel got to the shore, Rabbi Akiva himself came and sat next to him, and they were discussing halacha together. Amarti lo, Rabban Gamliel says, I told him, Beni, mihe elcha, who saved you? Who got you up out of the water? Amarli daf shel sefina nizdamenli. He says, a plank from a boat came to me. V'chol gal v'gal sheba alai ni'ana'ati lo roshi. And every time a wave came, I bowed my head down, and that way the waves did not knock me over. I was able to submit myself. If you stand tall, I guess he was not an expert surfer. So instead, he held onto the boat and he ducked under every wave, and that way he didn't get knocked off the plank, and the waves were able to bring him to shore. This is an important place to note that Rabbi Meir Shapiro, the founder of the Daf Yomi, would quote this very passage to say that Rabbi Akiva was saved by what? By daf. By a daf, right? So there you go. A daf a day is a great way to avoid the turbulent waves of our times. So it's definitely something holding on to that foundation of the page of Talmud a day. Okay, wonderful derasha. מכאן אמרו חכמים, אם יבואו רשעים על אדם ינענע לא ראשו. Chachamim learn further from this case that if wicked people come and they're bothering you and trying to thugs come, what should one do? Bow your head before them. Don't try to stand up to people that are coming to mug you. All right, just give in to them and live for another day. So if there's evil around, best at first anyway to restrain oneself and not fight, because you'll probably lose. Instead, submit yourself until you're able to gather strength and gather the proper resources in order to defend yourself. Okay, אמרתי באותה שעה כמה גדולים דברי חכמים שאמרו מים שיש להם סוף מותרת, מים שאין להם סוף אסורה. Rabban Gamliel says, at that time I said, see what great wisdom the sages had when they said that water that has an end, the wife is permitted, but if it has no end, she is prohibited. And this would be a case where it had no end. They looked around, Rabban Gamliel looked around and saw a big ocean, and there's no way Rabbi Akiva could go anywhere. But so most people, when they hear this halacha, they say, "Oh, look at the sages! What are they being so worrisome about? How is it possible anyone could live?" And they could take a cynical attitude towards it. Rabban Gamliel says, "See, here's an actual case where the rabbis have a good policy, and it is good to suspect that maybe a person can live even in the water, by here this example holding on to a plank. All right, now we have the exact same story, but with different characters. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Akiva, Pamachat hayiti mehalech b'sfina v'ra'iti sfina achat shemitarefet bayam. Rabbi Akiva, this time he's the one on the boat, not the one drowning. And he saw another boat that was sinking in the sea. And he was very sad because there was a great sage on the boat. Who was that great sage? That was Rabbi Meir. That's Rabbi Akiva's student. And when eventually I ended up in Kapodkia, that's up in Turkey, I got off the boat, and sure enough, Rabbi Meir came, and he was sitting next to me, and we were discussing halacha, like nothing happened. Amarti lo, beni mi elcha? So Rabbi Akiva asked Rabbi Meir, who got you up out of the water? Marli, gal tiradani lachavero v'chavero lechavero ad sheki'ani leyabasha. One wave carried me to another, passed me to another, until the waves pushed me all the way to dry land. אמרתי באותה שעה, כמה גדולים דברי חכמים שמרו מים שיש להם סוף אשתו מותרת, מים שאין להם סוף אשתו אסורה. And so Rabbi Akiva remarked to himself, see how great, how wise the sages are, who said that if the water has no edge, then the wife is still prohibited, because a person can in fact survive through the waves carrying him to the other side, even though you can't see the other side. Okay, this is very curious that they have the same exact story, almost the same word for word. There's a few details that are different. Here he held on to a plank. The second one, there seems to be no plank. But the details are very similar, and this is a phenomenon that Professor Shama Friedman wrote an article about, showing that sometimes called a good story is worth retelling. Sometimes you have a case where a story is retold with one person and then told again about that person's student. So here, Rabban Gamliel Rabbi Akiva, and then switch. Rabban Gamliel becomes the one on the boat, and his own student, Rabbi Meir. It is possible that, in this case, it is possible that both stories could have actually happened. However, unlikely. There are other cases of this where it's even more unlikely that the case happened. You can think of this as a kind of ika de amre, that the story is told in various versions. So these would be just two versions of one story. All right. Tenor bana nafal legov arayot en me'aidin alav lachafura mil anachashim akrabim me'aidin alav. The Braita teaches that if someone falls into a lion's den, you cannot testify that he for sure died. Maybe the lions weren't hungry and he was able to get out. But if he fell into a pit of snakes and scorpions, then you can testify that he died. There's no way he's going to survive that. Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera Omer af lachafura mela nechashim akrabim en ma'idin alav. And Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera says, even if he falls into a pit of snakes and scorpions, could be that he's alive. You cannot testify he's dead. Why? Hashinan shema habadhu, because maybe the guy who fell in is a snake charmer, and he's able to calm the snakes and the scorpions. Or maybe he's like Indiana Jones, and he knew that if you take a flame torch and you wave it around, then the snakes will be scared of it. And just like Indiana Jones, maybe he survived that way. Okay, v'tana kama agav itzit. But the first Tana who said, no, there's no way you can survive, he would say that because of the pressure of falling, he falls right onto them and smashes them. They're going to get angry, and even a snake charmer is not going to be able to calm them down after he smashed them from on top, and therefore for sure they attacked him, and for sure he is dead. Tenor Rabbanan nafal לתוך כבשן האש מעידין עליו ליורה מלא היין ושמן מעידין עליו. If someone falls into a furnace, you can testify that he has died. If he falls into a vat of boiling wine or oil, also no way he could survive. You can testify that he's dead. משום רבי אחא אמרו של שמן מעידין עליו מפני שהוא מבעיר, של יין אין מעידין עליו מפני שהוא מחבר. But Rabbi Acha distinguished between two cases. If it's oil, then for sure he died, because when he falls into the oil, some of the oil will splatter out of it, and the fire actually will become even stronger from the oil that goes down there. So that's just going to make it boil more. There's no way the guy could survive. He's going to be fried. Deep fried, unfortunately. But if it's wine, even though it's boiling wine, when he falls into the wine will spill over and put out the fire. And so even though surely he'll be very burnt, but maybe since the heat will go down, possibly that his legs will be burnt, but maybe he can survive somehow. But the other rabbi said, yeah, even wine, when it first touches the fire, it will extinguish a little, but eventually it excites it and ignites it even more. And so no, a person cannot live if he falls into a vat of boiling wine. Amar Rabbi Meir, Maaseh be'achad shenafal lebor hagadol. Rabbi Meir, he's the one that's machmir. We do not follow halacha like Rabbi Meir. He says no matter what kind of body of water, we suspect that the person could have lived. And he brought an example of someone who fell into a cistern and he survived after 3 days. So now we're going to figure out, how about the other rabbis? What would they say about this case? Tanya, Amru Lord, Rabbi Meir, and Mizkirin Maaseh Nisim. So it told Rabbi Meir, we're not disputing that your case happened, but that was a miracle story, and we're not going to rely on a miracle to decide the halacha. In the course of nature, no one can survive in underwater for more than a few minutes, and therefore, if it's an enclosed body and we see that they didn't come out, we know that they're dead. Could a miracle happen? Yeah, a miracle could happen, but we don't have to keep a woman to be an aguna for all life because maybe a miracle happened. Okay, my maaseh nisim. Now, what is miraculous about this, about staying under in a cistern for 3 days? If it's that there's no food and no drink, Esther in Megillat Esther says everybody let's not eat and not drink for 3 days. So it is possible to survive 3 days without food or drink. Notice that we're not talking about the person drowning, because we assume that somewhere underwater there is a air pocket in the cistern. When they build the cistern, there's some place there where you could stand and be able to breathe. Okay. It's interesting that they say no food and no water. If you're in the cistern, then I assume that there actually is water that you could drink. But maybe it's bad. Maybe the water went bad. Okay. Anyway, Ela de la Nahim. Rather, the problem is that the person cannot sleep. There's nowhere to sit or lie down, and the person cannot survive without sleeping for 3 days. Tamar Rabbi Yochanan shebua shelo ishan shalosh yamim malkin oto v'ishan la'atar. We know Rabbi Yochanan says halacha. If someone makes a vow, and says, I'm not going to sleep for 3 days, that's impossible. It's impossible to fulfill his vow, and therefore we don't even have to wait 3 days for him to violate the vow once he falls asleep after a day or two, but rather we give him lashes immediately for taking an oath in vain, and then he can go to sleep immediately because eventually he's going to violate the vow. So in fact, this is the miracle that we're talking about. The miracle is not that he was able to survive within the water because there are air pockets, and the miracle is not that you didn't eat because you could survive without eating, but sleeping, impossible. Okay, so now we'll turn to the Rabbi Meir. The Rabbi Meir himself also did not assume that a miracle happened, and that's why he's deciding halacha based on a miracle. Rather, what was he thinking? Kefin al gav kefin havu. Maybe there were arches, one on top of the other, kind of like in this picture. When they built the cistern, they often would build things on top of the cistern that's built within a city or near a structure. And so under the ground, they would put these foundation arches, and so the person who fell into the cistern can lean on one of these arches and be able to sleep in that way. So it is possible to sleep. Okay, Rabbanan, the Shishahavu, Rabbanan say, yeah, but those arches are made out of marble and they're slippery, impossible to sleep and rest on one of those one of those arches. Rabbi Meir says, nevertheless, it's impossible that the person didn't grasp some part of the arch and sleep a little. You don't have to have a long sleep, but even a little doze, holding on to one of the arches would be possible. And therefore, it's not a miracle that the person survived. It's possible for someone to, in fact, survive. Good. Tenor banan maaseh bibito shel Nechunya chofer shichin shenafla lebor hagadol. Here's another story about this person named Nechunya. He was a well digger. He would go along the paths, the highways, where people would walk and come walk to Jerusalem, and he would dig wells all along so that the travelers would have water to drink. So he's a real tzaddik, really helping people so that they can travel and have water. And one time, his own daughter fell into the great cistern, a great cistern. So the people that were there, they came and told Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa that the daughter of Nechunya fell into the pit. What should we do? Should we assume that she is dead? Sha'a rishona amar lehem shalom, shini amar lehem shalom, shilishit amar lehem alta. Chanina, in the first hour, it doesn't necessarily mean literally an hour, first time period, he said, she's okay. Second, she said she's okay. After the third, Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa says, she got out of the cistern and she is alive and she's fine. So he wasn't even there. Amar la beti mi elcha. So she came to Chanina ben Dosa and they asked, my daughter, not his daughter, but saying, the girl, who got you out? Amra lo zachar shel rechelim nizdamen li vezaken manhigo. It says a male sheep, a ram, came to me, and there was an old man pulling me out. In other words, this is a scene of Abraham Avinu with the ram. Idea is that in the merit of Abraham, who was willing to sacrifice his child, this girl was saved. So the other people there said, what are you, a prophet? How did you know right at that moment, after 3 periods of time, that she came out? אמר להם, לא נביא אנוכי ולא בן נביא אנוכי, אלא דבר שהצדיק מתעסק בו, ייכשל בו זרעו. רבי חנינה ben Dosa says, I'm not a prophet, not the son of a prophet. But is it possible that the very mitzvah that a person is engaged in, he is all day long, he digs wells for the benefit of the public? Can it be that he will be punished? His children will be punished by the same thing that he did so much good with? That wouldn't be fair at all. So therefore, I knew for sure that she would be saved. It just might take a little time, so I waited the maximum time that a person could possibly survive, and then I said for sure she is saved. That's a happy ending for this part of the story, but the story does go on with a sad ending. Amar Rabbi Abba, Afa pichen met beno basama. Even though his daughter was saved, at some point his son died of thirst in a time of drought. שנאמר וסביביו נסערה מאוד מלמד שהקדוש ברוך הוא מדקדק עם סביביו כחוט השערה. Why did his son die? Because the pasuk says around God, Hashem, the storms mightily. The word storm, se'ara, is also the same word as hair's breadth, se'ara, that Hashem is exacting with those that are close to him, righteous people, even up to a hand's breadth. So the well digger, Nechunya, even though he was righteous, he might have done something wrong, and his son in fact died, even though he actually died of thirst, which is also ironic because he helped the public by giving them water. But nevertheless, even though his daughter was saved, because it's not fair that she should be punished in the same with the mitzvah that the father did, but nevertheless, it did not save the son for whatever reason, because he was righteous. Rabbi Chanina amar mehachal neras besod kedoshim rabba ve'nora al kol sevivav. Rabbi Chanina says the same idea from a different pasuk. God is feared, dreaded in the council of the holy ones, and feared by all that are about him, meaning those that are near to him, the righteous, are punished in the most exacting way. So it's not on account of his being so bad that he deserves such a terrible thing, but rather, in fact, the opposite, because of his great righteousness. We now come to the next Mishnah, which is about accepting testimony that a husband has died from women, children, and non-Jews. Afilu shama min hanashim omerot met ish peloni dayo. Even if the women were just talking among themselves and they said, so-and-so died, that is sufficient. It's not, of course, if a woman comes to court and gives official testimony, then yes, obviously you believe her. But the point here is that even if they're just speaking and they happen to talk about someone, we can rely on that and assume that the person actually died. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu shama min hatinokot omerim hare anu holchim lispod v'likbor et ish peloni ben shu mitkaven ben she'eno mitkaven. Rabbi Yehuda says even if the kids we're saying, hey, we're going to go to the eulogy and burial of this person, and it doesn't matter whether in these cases whether they intend to testify or whether they're just happening to be speaking and it's not any formal testimony, they were just talking among themselves. Either way, we can assume that is true. Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava omer b'Yisrael af al pi shu mitkaven ubegoy im haya mitkaven en aduto adut. Yehuda ben Bava, however, makes a distinction and says if it's a Jewish person, even if he is intentionally saying this as testimony, we believe him. And all the more so if he's not intending. But however, for a non-Jew, if he's intending for testimony, then we suspect maybe he has some reason to lie. But if he's not intending for testimony, he just happens to be talking, oh yeah, I was at that eulogy, or I heard that this person died, that is sufficient because he's not lying, he's just telling a story, and so we can tell it from roundabout. Evidence is actually better than direct evidence because he doesn't think that you're using it for testimony, so less likely that he's lying. Okay, question. V'dilma la azleh. When you said that children said, okay, we're going to eulogize and bury this person, maybe they're not actually going to go. How do we know that the person actually died? That maybe they just assumed, they think the person died and said, let's go and, see if there's a eulogy. So Shemuel explains, no, the Mishnah is talking about a case where the kids say, we just came from eulogizing and burying so-and-so. So therefore, if it happened already, for sure the person's dead. If they talk about it in the future, we're going to, maybe it's just based on a rumor of the person was very sick, but maybe he didn't actually die. This is one of the nice little quaint vignette as found in the Talmud here. Maybe the kids were just play acting, and it was actually just a grasshopper they were playing with, and the grasshopper died, and they happened to give the grasshopper a name that was the same name as someone who we think may have died. Maybe this is the children's way of processing what death is and all that, to play act and make believe they're eulogizing over this grasshopper. But they gave it the same name, but maybe the person that we are thinking about did not actually die. Okay, that's really funny. And cute. Okay, dekamre ken vechen rabanan havutam ken vechen saftane havutatam. No, rather must be that they said this and this rabbi was there, and this and such eulogizers were there. So if they actually name details of the people that spoke and who were there, then it's obvious that they actually were at this real funeral for a real person. They probably wouldn't have made up all those names if they were just making believe and having a funeral for a grasshopper. Okay, regarding the non-Jew, we trust him if he does not intend to give testimony. When it says that it's actually negative if the non-Jew has intention, that's if he has intention to permit the woman to remarry. He says, okay, he comes and says, I testify that she can remarry. That we don't trust. It's not up to him to tell us who she can marry or not. But if he has intention to say that the person is dead, then that we do trust, even though it's actually testimony. Now, what's the difference between the two types of testimony? How will we know which one it is? If he comes to the court and the non-Jew says, this person has died, therefore you should allow his wife to remarry. then it's obvious to us that his intention is to help the woman. And if that's his intention, I don't know, maybe he just is friends with her, so that's what his purpose is, but maybe he's lying. But if he says, met setam, zehu nitkaven laidut, if he just comes and says, this guy died, then that's it, he's giving testimony, person died, and he probably is may not be thinking of the consequences regarding her, so therefore we can trust it in that case, according to Shemuel. And similarly, Resh Lakish says the same thing. Itmar nameh amar Resh Lakish. Lo shanu ela shintkaven lahatir, avan kadna'id aidut. We only don't trust his testimony if he has intention to permit the wife, but if he just has intention to testify that the man is dead, we accept it. אמר לרבי יוחנן, לא כך היה מעשה בהושעיה ברבי, שתרעמים 85 זקנים, אמר להם, לא שנו אלא שהתכוון להתיר, אבל התכוון להעיד עדותו עדות, ולא הודו לו חכמים. Rabbi Yochanan challenges this, says, remember there was a story with Hoshaya, the son of Rabbi, or Hoshaya, the distinguished one, that they permitted, rather he, Hoshaya, permitted these women to marry based on testimony of a non-Jew. And then the 85 elders who were there protested. So he, Hoshaya, said, Lo shanu, he quoted this line of Resh Lakish and said that when the Mishnah says, we cannot rely on a non-Jew when he has intention. That's only if he has intention to permit the woman. But if he just has intention to testify that the man is dead, then we can't trust him. And that's what happened in that case. A man said, oh, these various women are dead. So Rabbi Yoshaya accepted it. But the other sages said, sorry, we do not agree to this. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan has a story that challenges Resh Lakish's Okimta and says, not so. You cannot trust the testimony of a non-Jew, even if he only has intention to testify that the person is dead. Okay, so according to this, Rabbi Yochanan's interpretation, how will they understand the Mishnah when it says regarding a non-Jew, if he had intention, then we do not accept his testimony. So rather it means that if he has intention at all, whether to permit the woman or to testify that the man is dead, any testimony that he gives on purpose is no good. We only trust him if he's speaking offhandedly. He happened to be telling a story that he was passing by this funeral and he was stuck in traffic because of it, and that's why he was late. So then we could trust him because he doesn't know that you're looking for that information. For example, there was a non-Jew going around saying, anyone from the house of Chivai? Who's from the house of Chivai? Because Chivai has died and he wanted people to know. But wasn't in court, he wasn't testifying. He didn't think anyone's going to make any kind of judicial decision based on it. Rav Yosef heard him saying that, or someone told him he was saying that, and he said, you know what, we can rely on that, and he permitted his wife to marry. Or a similar story, there was some non-Jew who was going around and saying, oh, woe for the brave horseman who was in Pumbedita. He has died. But they knew who it was. And Rav Yosef or Rava permitted his wife to go and remarry. More stories. Manika behasa taba chasa. There was a non-Jew going around saying, anyone here from the house of Chasa, because Chasa drowned. Rav Nachman, Elokim, achlu kavre lechasa. Rav Nachman says, oh my, I can't believe that fish have eaten Chasa. He drowned and now fish are eating him. Rav Nachman heard the non-Jew saying that, and you see, Rav Nachman believed it to the extent that he lamented. Because Rav Nachman said that, his wife went and got remarried because she heard Rav Nachman say, woe is this guy, so that seems to be rabbinic confirmation that he died. And no one said anything to her to protest, right? She went and married and everybody was okay with it. אמר רב אשי שמאמינה הד אמר רבנן מים שאין להם סוף אשתו אסורה הנמילה לכתחילה אבל אי נסיב למפקינן למינר. Rav Ashi learns from this story that when the rabbi said up above that water that has no edge, the wife is prohibited. And this was a case where the water had no edge. So how come she was allowed? How come they didn't say anything? Oh, that only means we're not going to allow her to get married when she comes and asks. But if she goes herself and she gets married, she finds a couple of edim and she does it on her own without first asking a bet din. We do not make them get divorced because the likelihood is that he died. We're just not sure enough to permit it lechatechila, and so that's why it's because no one asked Rav Nachman. Presumably, if they asked him, he would have said, "Wait, you have to wait and check." But most people will assume that it's likely that the person died, so that's what Rav Nachman lamented, and that's why we don't make her get divorced. Or another version, maybe Rav Nachman actually said, yes, the wife can marry. Amar Chasa Gabra Rabba Ite. He said Chasa. Why? What was his reasoning? He said Chasa is a great man. Imita deslik kala itled lemileta. Because if he would have come out on the other side of somewhere we can't see, on some shore, there would have been some publicity. It would have been announced because everybody knows who he is. And the fact that we waited a while and no one said that they saw him, so that's why it's likely that he's dead. Similar to what we said before about sage. Velahi lo shena gabra rabba velo shena lav gabra rabba di'abad in nachatechila la. But in the end, we reject this reasoning and we say, no, it doesn't matter. We go back to the first Ikada Amide. Doesn't matter if it's a great person. Doesn't matter if it's a relatively unknown person. Bidi avad, if the person already got married, then they can stay married. But lechatechila, we will not let them get married based on if they drown in a body of water where we can't see the edge. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.